Welcome to the University of the West Indies, the Department of Literatures and English Cape Lecture Series for 2021. This is the first time that the department will be offering the Literatures and English Cape Lecture Series online. One of the advantages of that is that you will be able to access the lectures at your own convenience after they have been posted. But one of the disadvantages is that you will not have that direct and immediate interaction with the presenter that you would have in a face-to-face situation. So I encourage you to post your questions in the chat. The presenter will be able to see these questions and will respond to them at the end of the presentation. Another disadvantage of the online mode of delivery is that sometimes it can be pretty easy to be distracted in the online classroom. I suggest that you use note-taking as a way of remaining focused. Have your notebook next to you and write notes from the lecture. I expect that many of you intend to continue your studies at university after you've completed your CAPE exam. And I hope that most of you have already applied to the University of the West Indies. Be sure to go on to the Literatures in English website to look at the programs we offer to see if any of them are a fit for you. In addition to our long-standing BA Literatures in English, we also offer a BA in Liberal Studies, a BA in Film Studies, and most recently, a BA in Writing, Literature, and Publishing. If you have any questions or queries, you can contact us using the contact information given on the website. You can easily access the website through the UWI Mona homepage. Click on faculties and then click on the name of the department. We'd be happy to hear from you. I hope you enjoy our CAPE lecture series, and I hope that you find it instructive and useful as you prepare for your CAPE Literatures in English exam. Good luck in your exams, and I hope to see you at UWI Mona, and especially in the Department of Literatures in English. Thank you.
Good morning and welcome to our session on An Echo in the Bone by Dennis Scott. My name is Carolyn Allen and I am here with Eugene Williams, good friend of mine, but more importantly, a student of Dennis Scott while he was at the School of Drama. And Eugene has recently retired from the very position that Dennis Scott had held years ago as Director of Studies at the School of Drama at the Edna Manley College for the Visual and Performing Arts. Now, what we're going to be doing today is discussing a production of the play An Echo in the Bone that was done with students, directed by Eugene in 2014. And we are going to be guided in our discussion of that by 3 CAPE questions. So I'm going to share my screen now and go to a slideshow as soon as I have permission to share my screen and go to a slideshow. One thing I forgot to mention that the head of the department had told me just this morning is that Dennis Scott himself, the writer of the play, was actually one of the first students studying West Indian drama at the University of the West Indies, Mona. So, screen sharing time. Okay, for some reason my present, oh, here we go, loading. All right, so a couple extra clicks have taken me further on. Right, so we wanted to be guided by questions, the kinds of questions that you might get on CAPE, and we have selected these 3 questions to guide our discussion this morning. Theatre seems to rely on spectacle. With reference to one Shakespearean tragedy or romance and one work of modern drama, discuss the extent to which spectacle is significant in each play. Now, I know that on CAPE, you are asked to do a comparative question, and the questions, therefore, will always have this wording, reference to one Shakespearean tragedy or romance. And we today will not be looking at it comparatively. We'll be focusing on echoing the bone and hoping that you can pull from that what you need to respond to the question comparatively. So the second question that is guiding us is this one. The playwright's representation of social issues on stage, did I say that? Of social issues on stage depends primarily on his use of dramatic techniques. And the question would have the usual wording and end with discuss the validity of this statement. So social issues and dramatic techniques. And finally, what makes a play memorable to any audience is the dramatic representation of conflict. So those are our 3 guides. You can note the keywords and listen out for them. As we go into our conversation now, what we will be doing is looking at slides which have been taken from the video recording of the production in 2014. And the slides will go through the play in sequence, chronologically, and we will be making our comments on the slides as you see them. So beginning with, this was the cover of the program. Right, and so Eugene, time for you. Why this image chosen for the cover of the program?
Well, as you know, violence is a central theme in the play. The play itself is a rite of passage of a family. It's a 9-night, which is the sort of ritual motif being used, or the ritual action being used for the rite of passage. After some kind of rupture or dislocation, rites of passage occur, starting with the rupture, and then it goes through transition, and then the rejuvenation, the reconstruction of whatever was ruptured. That's the process of the rite of passage. And there are in a way 2 sorts of time capsules, if you wish. That of the family of crew that's having the 9-night. And the other one is, of course, nation, the reconstruction of Caribbean nation, in this specific case, Jamaica, going through a rite of passage. After this, the middle passage experience and the amputation of our ancestors from Africa to the reconstruction of a decolonized society. So there are those 2 continuums that sort of crisscross each other in the course of the play, and at the center of it is violence. So what is focused on there, right in the foreground, is Sun playing crew, of course, raising the machete over stone playing Mass Charlie.
Mhm. Okay. And that is an image that we see versions of. You know, that motif in the play of echoing, we see
Mhm.
versions of this image recurring. As we go through, we will come upon them. Okay, this now, I thought was a very interesting aspect of the production because I had always wondered, reading the text, how the viewing audience would know those historical moments. So we have, as you said, this layering. We
Mhm.
have the present, which is the night of the nine nights. We have the recent past, which are those moments, I think, like 1 week ago and so on, and maybe 3 years ago. Those moments that involve the family, as the family members that they are. And one of the difficulties with the text is that you never get any other character names. You only see the names of the primary cast. And they play various people, especially in the historical past, which is the other layer of time that we have. The slave ship, 1792, the eve of emancipation, the scene with the Maroons, those scenes, the scene with the auction. So I'd always wondered, how would members of an audience know those moments in the past? And here is the choice you made for this production, and I'd like you to tell us about it. This 1937 in lights on the floor of the
Right,
stage.
right. Um, yeah, sometimes in plays you would see the year of a scene or the year of the play in which the story is taking place. But in this particular play, I think the dates provided by the playwright are signifiers of an experience, um, and the dates themselves resonate for a number of people. When you hear 1937, um, that resonates as the particular period, the 30s, of the birth of the trade union movement, the birth of political parties. In other words, that decolonizing period. It was a period when Marcus Garvey was doing his work in the 30s at is pageantry in here in Jamaica, for instance. So it was a era of of the sort of the initiation, the beginning of the decolonizing process, and so I opted to plaster that as it were in a very bold way across the stage. So depending on the scene. So in this scene, it is projected on the floor of the stage. And in the Dennis Scott Studio Theater, it's tiered seating. So the audience sitting on tiered seats looking down so they could see the floor. In some instances, it was plastered across the back. In some cases, across the set, particularly to start the scene. So that was a choice there because, like I say, I think they're not dates on which the story is taking place. It is cultural signifiers of those key events in the play itself. For instance, in the scene, you're not going to see that one in the slideshow, but in the scene where the slave ship is moored off the coast of Africa, that is 1792. And that was the year that the abolition motion, was first presented by Wilberforce. So one can read interesting things into that, because I think that one of the things that Scott is doing is he is trying to establish that period of the making of Caribbean, um, and there is this signifying moment when the ship is moored off the coast of off the coast of Africa, and it's happening at a period just when Wilberforce had submitted his first motion for abolition. So it's almost a constructing a myth of origins, as it were, where we began. We began in the Middle Passage, of course, with echoes from Africa. So that 1792 is again that kind of signifier in that instance. And so, you know, several others are mentioned.
Okay, so we're moving on then. Next moment. This character is Rachel, and
Yes.
she's preparing for the night now. What she's holding in her hands is crew's clothes that they have found.
Yes. Just to
Mhm.
make a point about that last slide we spoke about too. If a question like the one on one of the past papers about spectacle and how
Mhm.
significant is spectacle,
Mhm.
um, lights, set and costume are some of the elements of spectacle. And in that particular case with the 1937, it was lights. It's through the device of light that one was able to project that year. So
Mhm.
that brought an added dimension if you were to see the play in performance. In this case, it's this is the opening moment of the nine night. Um, the nine night is being set up, and this is a moment after Rachel has just sung the opening um, song, as it were, me alone in
Yellow.
the wilderness.
Mhm.
And she comes in and she's dealing with the table, the nine night table, and she picks up Crew's clothes, because Crew's clothes are the clothes that they found with blood and so on. She picks it up and she hugs it. Um, and among other things, she says, "Tonight I belong to the dead." And in a sense, for me, this was the beginning that establishes that absent presence of Crew, of the spirit, right?
Mhm.
Um, um, and because subsequent to this will be the invocation of that spirit. So this is establishing. If you look at how she's looking out, she's there's a larger presence that she's acknowledging in the space. And she's in fact saying to Bridget, who's calling her from in the house, that she can't deal with her now. She's communing with the dead,
Okay.
and that kind of motif is going to continue through the space as the various celebrants at the nine night come into the barnyard.
Mhm. So now we are seeing them setting up the table for the nine night. And one of the things, there have been various discussions about the use of the nine nights as a vehicle in the play. And one of the things that I like to provoke people with is the idea of thinking of the nine nights not as the movement into the historical scenes, not as flashback, but as bringing the past into the present
Mhm.
through spirit possession, and there are various vehicles through spirit possession, through dream,
Mhm.
through altered states of consciousness because of using ganja or drinking liquor or the effect of the drums. But these various vehicles to bring the past into the present, because he has insisted that the cast must be all black people, and they are going to be in turn possessed by these various spirits of our past, including the spirits of white people, that we as a tribe, that we as a family must deal with. So setting up the nine night, which is the crucible for these transitions to happen.
Right. It's a crucible indeed, as you said, the vehicle, the sort of ritual marker. Um, um, I went a little bit beyond that and made it this a sort of frame for the whole show, for the whole production. As you said, it is the frame, and it's that overarching thing is because I saw the whole thing as rite of passage as well. And so one of the things I did was that the table was ever present, and the table traveled as the play traveled. So the table did not only remain, it didn't remain in its original position. It traveled, and it traveled in a kind of spiraling clockwise position. So it journeyed in time.
Perhaps I should clarify that that the table didn't levitate, that the actors were moving the table.
Right,
Were
right.
moving the table
Yeah.
around, and it was kind
That's
of
what
a
the movie
ritual,
did.
like a ritual dance,
Right.
right? As they move the table into different positions for each
Yeah.
transition. Yeah, so that you kind of
And
change perspective each time.
yes.
Yeah.
And Madame, who's a sort of shepherdess in the piece, who sort of remains in the present because she doesn't play any other role.
Right.
She was always connected and at that table in that journey.
Okay.
So here, what we are seeing is the setting up of the table, which is critical to the nine night, because there's certain objects. For instance, there's food, bread, cheese. There's a lantern, the light, because the light is light and water are all sort of conduits for the spirits, and a couple of other things. And Sun is like her chief lieutenant in the process. So there he is. He went to the shop to buy stuff, and he's brought it back. And of course, I should mention as well that he also goes through the rite of passage in his own right, because he in a sense becomes the head of the house, you know.
Yes. Yes.
So he has to go through that journey, and he has to go through that journey as well because he is severely affected by the loss of his father. And among other things, he starts as a very angry young man. So in order to become the head of the house, that has to be purged. He has to come to understand what is happening, and he has to understand that in an experiential way. So he goes through his that rite of passage.
And it is his line. It is his line that gives us the title of the play. Well, not exactly, but he has a line where he says, the minute he saw Master Charlie, he felt something. This anger was in him, and he was
Right.
asking his mother, why is it that he feels that way? And that is the echo in his bone of
Right.
the history of violence.
Right.
And
Right.
the play is concerned for us to understand how can we move forward, beyond this violence.
Right.
And as you say, it occupies his body. Its crew
Mhm.
comes back in him, and they have similar personalities.
Yes.
They are both, given to the anger and so on. And there's this important contrast between Sun and Jackal. And we see when Sun plays a maroon that he's the angry one who wants to shed blood. When
Right.
Jackal plays a maroon, he's the one who says, how we're going to move forward if we keep killing.
Right.
And then Jackal plays doctor, character of healing and so on. So we see these as history moves through, we see it embodied in people who share characteristics with the characters that they're called upon to play. Right?
Right. Right.
Moving on.
Yes.
And here is possession.
Yes. And possession is one of the chief dramatic device being used in the piece, where possession is simulated, as it were. It's not actual possession, and here is where actors and director are challenged to find that simulation, that at the same time, while simulated, must have a certain realistic quality about it. And to do so, I took the cast an actual ritual, um, to watch possession happen. I did two productions of this play actually. In the first production, we were fortunate to see a violent possession of a young man, which the actor had to study. Actor playing Dream. This is Dream's possession.
Right. This is Dream here in the blue, and that's
Yes,
Rattler in front of him.
right. And I think that is either Lally or
Lally,
Bridget
I think it's Lally sitting in the corner, right?
in the background. Um, right. So there are three sets of well, more than three. Um, there's Dream's possession, and then there's Son's possession by his father's spirit. And then there is the possession, which I think we have a slide for that, of
Of
Rachel.
Rachel. Right.
Yeah.
So here, just so that the students know, so Rattler is on the drum, of course. This is
Mhm.
Stone, Dreamboat, Madame in the blue, and P. And here she is doing her sort of shepherd role, the person who is in command of the ceremony and taking care of people as they go through. And this is another um, moment in the possession sequence for
This is
this
actually
is starting the ritual.
after that possession of my Dream, who was want a better expression, behaving badly,
Well,
fighting
he dropped the
Rattler.
gun.
Yes,
Right, he dropped the gun
right,
and wanted the rum. Right,
right.
the rum.
And in a way, as I think is said by I think one of the characters, he's behaving badly, but it's like the spirit lick him for behaving badly. Um, because they are going to go on now to invoke the spirit. They are going to be in a way go on to because Rachel, after that initial thing that we saw, she goes out and she comes back in. Once she comes back in and now she's dressed for the ritual, she begins the ritual by saying, let's talk about him, something like that. And they start to talk about him, and in that process begins the invocation, where they are invoking his memory, invoking his spirit. And one of the things, doing it in the theater allows for the viewer and the participants, the actors, is to put that invocation into action. The text itself enables it, I think, because the text in the sequence is a sort of incantation,
a call and response.
Call and response. And I'm going to just read a little section here to remind students. Madam says, "Who is dead?" Rachel says, "A man." P says, "What is his name?" Rachel says, "Crew." Dream, where him come from? Rachel, darkness. Jacko, what his life was like? Rachel, sorrow. Stone, what his life was? Rachel, smoke. And in a sense, what you sense in that incantation is almost like it's an opening of doors, opening of spaces for him to enter. At least that is what I saw it as a director. So it had to be done, the chant had to be done that way in terms of its rhythmic structure. Because at the end of it, shortly after smoke, he appears, son appears through the possession.
Right. Crew is going to manifest.
And Crew is going to manifest. So one of the things that is visual once you're doing the play, that if you can't visualize it while reading play, you don't get the sense of, is that as a sense of event and an introduction of that event through other events. And invocation is a critical part of not just spirit
possession,
but also part of remembering.
Mm-hmm.
And it is significant that the community, the family is remembering, because memorializing is built on the notion that a life is only knowable as a life when it becomes the object of other people's aesthetic activity and storytelling, right?
Mm-hmm.
Memory is pretty much about other people telling the story of what they're remembering.
Mm-hmm.
That is a significant part of memorializing.
Right. And story is how we as humans know ourselves and how we build community and
Exactly.
how we have a sense of who we are, who we
Right.
have been. And
Right.
this is what helps us to carry
And one of
a
the
group
things
forward.
And
Mm-hmm.
one of the things that happened in those two slides is you're noticing use of gesture, movement, body. So it's not just about people sitting telling stories. It's
Right.
about an invocation. And in
Mm-hmm.
the drama, you have to ask yourself, how is that done? You
Right.
know, in spectacle, in action.
Right. So there's a lot more movement and activity on the
Right,
stage in these moments than we are likely to imagine as we are
right,
reading the text. Right.
right.
So we talked about crew manifesting, and here is Sun Sun possessed.
Mhm.
Here is
Right.
Sun Sun transformed into crew.
Well, if for those of you students who might have seen moments of possession or heard about it, it's a state of, I would call it a state of heightened intensity. Um, when you look at somebody, and even if they're not moving, you could see that the energy is quite heightened in them. Um, but that sense of transcendence, that sense of being heightened, um, I chose to put him on a higher level. Um, uh, and the other people are down on the floor, so he's on a platform. And here to also address the issue of the question of spectacle. Set is part of spectacle, right? Part of that visual manifestation of a play. Um, and the play does not happen realistically. So while Scott describes the barn realistically, what it looks like, it has to also accommodate several other spaces. It has to accommodate spaceship. It has to accommodate uh,
Spaceship.
not spaceship.
That's the
Sorry,
accommodate ship, slave ship.
the slave ship. Oh, what an interesting slip of the
Yes. Uh-huh.
must have been a slip of the mind as well. Um, uh, right. So the question is, how do you abstract those realistic things and represent them on stage?
Mm-hmm.
All right. So the set was an abstracted space with platforms and ramps and openings and that kind of thing. And here, Sun Sun is uh, I think this might have been sort of beginning, close to the beginning
Yes.
of the
Position.
possession.
He's just walked up and he's standing up there. This is
Right.
another moment in it. Mm-hmm.
And one you also want to capture, and here you have the facility of lights, the sense of mystery, a sense of mystification, and the lights is doing that based on how he's lit.
Mm-hmm.
And of course you're seeing him going through movement as well, because I elected to interpret him or to shape him in the context of one of the Orisha deities of the Yoruba, because they offer movement motifs. That all the Orishas have movement motifs that are recognizable by some people. So he was using some of that.
And he was modeled on which Orisha?
Ogun.
Ogun.
Yeah.
And what are the elements and principles of that deity?
One of the things is sort of god of the cutting edge, god of iron.
Mm-hmm.
All right, and he carries a weapon, whether it's an axe or, in this case, a machete.
A machete, yeah.
Yeah. Right.
Okay. Oh, sorry. Okay. And something we can't see well here, I think you
Yeah.
Have him doing
It ends
something.
with him pulling the machete through his teeth.
Mm.
Right? That's
And
the final.
why?
Again, the idea was um, trying to capture that um, notion of violence. So this was a violent act.
Mm-hmm.
You know, how can I lift the violence that is central to the thing, and the violence that has, in a way, ruptured family and community, the violence of of even the amputation from of our ancestors from Africa. You
Right.
know, kind of create that symbol in movement.
Right. And of course, we see the violence. I'm moving forward partly because I'm watching time,
Yes,
and we're almost at quarter to. And that use of the knife, we also see happening in the slave ship. So this is a moment when we have made the first significant time transition from the present of the Nine Nights into the historical past with
right,
1792, which we spoke about before. But you can
right,
tell us something about how this was staged.
right. Well, I think Scott talks about it. The water being kicked over in the
Mhm.
ritual, the possession happening. Then there are the lines that one has to create a kind of distance between Son and the rest of people as Crew is talking through Son to Rachel, um, and then the scene transitions into the middle passage,
Mhm.
right, to the slave ship. Well, I chose not to go to blackout. There were no blackouts actually, but to represent something that I think that is also happening, which I referred to earlier, which is that the actors themselves, one of the reasons why the playwright asked for the actors to be Black is that they must also go through that subjective experience of the rite of passage. So that an audience must also be seeing actors at work, where these are actors who are, in a way, actors playing a character,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah. Mhm.
Right? So in other words, actors playing themselves, playing a character, and in some instances it multiplies even more further. So what
Mhm.
happens here is that the people who are in
Nine
the
nights.
nine night actually transition on stage,
Okay.
right, under the supervision of Madame,
Right.
right, as they stand there and they basically transition into the
So
slave.
they shed their clothes.
They shed their clothing.
They shed their nine night clothes and they're reduced to the coverings of the enslaved.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. And the
And
chain. We can see the chain over here.
right,
Tell us something about how you use the chain.
right. Well,
So let me
I
just
did this
highlight
play.
this.
I did this play before and
Here's the
and
chain.
couldn't find functionality.
Mhm.
Um, couldn't find a way to use it dramatically. And in this production, I found a way. Um, and the chain served two purposes. The chain was a symbol of the enslavement,
Mhm.
um, and in the upcoming slave ship, it is also the mast of the ship.
Right.
As you will probably see in the next slide, um, it becomes a crow's nest. But
Right.
not only that, uh, um, Sonson's possession ends when he begins the ascent of the chain,
Mhm.
right? So, and he's gonna go up that chain to the roof of the barn. So when you see him possessed next, later in the play, he's up in the roof
Mhm.
and he comes down through that chain,
Right. Up in the
uh,
roof above our heads. And then
above
this
our head.
transitions through a changing of lights And
right.
on the chain, we see
Is P.
the actor P, well, the character P, but he's playing now a sailor on the ship,
Yes, yes,
enslaved, who is talking
yes.
about
He's one of the
life and
sailors.
land and the heat and
Right.
the drum and all these things. Mm.
Yeah. And he is then he's talking about his whole life, his
Mhm.
life in this godforsaken heat.
Right.
All right. And
And
looking,
dreaming of the possibility of settling in the islands and taking
yeah,
a woman and yeah,
yeah.
and these things. All
And
right.
looking down at the enslaved in the hold, which we
Mm-hmm.
probably see next.
Mm-hmm. Right.
There
Here
they
they
are.
are.
There they are. So in a way, and I think there's a chain around them. I don't remember if it was the first production that I had the chain around them or the second production.
Mm-hmm.
But so in a sense, that chain that the enslaver, the sailor, is connected to this chain that entraps these guys.
Right.
So when you read this play,
Sorry. Mm-hmm.
when you read this play, you can sometimes wonder how the hell you're gonna do it since it's not a movie. But here,
Yes.
just lights and symbol does it because
Right.
that is abstracted and so is the production.
And here's a moment that echoes, that is one of the echoes of the use of the blade, the use of the weapon. This is a cutting out of Rattler's tongue.
Yeah.
And of course, there's the echo of Rattler the drummer in the present being mute, right?
Mhm.
Not having speech, but having the drum as an instrument of communication, of spirit invocation, of language and communication.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So this that's the cutting of the, and here after they would have passed him hand to hand to each other, they
Mhm.
take him back to the hold.
Right.
And yeah,
Okay. More you wanted to say about that?
just to mention that
Mhm.
that moment of Rattler's tongue being cut out
Mhm.
is symbolic of that moment I was talking about earlier, where our ancestors were amputated from their home, from
Mhm.
their history.
Right.
It is also interesting that Rattler will be is the drummer
Right.
who plays the guy who loses his tongue. He's the drummer. He's the guy who carries he plays the drum, which in a way captures the memories, and through his drumming, um, the echoes of that we have in our bone, the
Right.
noises in our blood,
Right. And
right?
perhaps in a way the language of the of the mother country.
Right,
In a way, at least symbolically, the language of the
right,
mother country and its
right.
rhythms and so on and energies. Right?
And later on, the wisdom
Mhm.
of how to deal with it.
Right.
This
No.
one
Mhm.
this was just put here to again. This is Jacko in the maroon scene
Mhm.
in the bushes, um, and he's actually appearing in the audience. He appears in among the people in the audience.
Right. This person here is an audience member, and he's sort of jumping just over their shoulders. Uh
Yeah,
huh. Right.
and that's an interesting way to show that. This is the maroon scene. There's Jacko and Son playing the two maroons, and
Jacko.
here
Son.
the knife appears again.
Right. In a
Uh,
kind of in a bit of a reversal, because we had just seen it in the slave ship with the white sailor over Black Rattler. Now we're
mhm,
going to see Black Son Maroon over White Planter,
right,
who claims to be
right,
lost or whatever, or
right,
claims to be hunting more or whatever. Mhm.
right,
So the
and then,
image reverses and it's going to
mhm,
come back again with
right,
Son playing crew
right,
over Mass
right,
Charlie.
right,
Mhm.
right, right, and of course, here is where perhaps most of all in play that the whole um, issue of violence is being
Mhm.
discussed. Um, yeah, Son would like to decapitate him,
Yes, right.
right?
Whereas Jacko
Uh,
argues for
right,
some kind of understanding,
right.
and
And
talks about having, what is it, having learned his language or something, having white blood in him and
yeah,
having the language, right?
yeah, yeah. It's a very interesting scene for that purpose. How do you deal with your oppressor?
Right.
You know?
And right, and the play has a series of debates in it.
Yes.
Right. We already have two questions from the audience in the chat. So if we're going to deal with them, we're going to need to like run through
Okay.
the
So
rest of
let's
the slides.
um the this is Rachel's possession. Um and in a way, well, this one is a mild possession actually. This one, she in the scene just before this, she was sleeping, and then she gets up and she seems preoccupied. She doesn't go into a sort of very explosive possession.
Mhm.
It's almost like a trance. It's almost as if she was dreaming and the dream manifests, right?
Mhm.
And again, Madam Chick takes charge, and the play takes a detour into what's going to be a focus on the life of Rachel and the life
Right.
of Bridget.
Right.
So the
And,
two women are going to be coming into focus now,
right.
and the
And the
energy in this possession is different.
is different. And we have again a kind of mirroring or echoing in the what we discover, a kind of triangle with Rachel Stone and, sorry, Rachel Charlie, played by
Yeah,
Stone, Rachel Charlie and crew,
right.
which kind of mirrors the triangle with Bridget, Sonson, and
Son
Jacko.
and
Right?
Jaco, right.
Okay, moving on, running along. Here is Sonson as crew in the heat with the rum and the machete.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. So he's in other words, he is what happens later. The confrontation is in a way being prepared through liquor, his weapon, and the heat.
And the heat. Right.
Right? And as a counterpoint, sort of in what takes place here is, while that beginning of that possession was about invocation of the spirit, this one is about confrontation in
Mhm.
my interpretation, my conceptual interpretation of the piece.
Right. So this
So
is Sonson
yeah,
as crew,
right.
and the
And
cast below him again.
mhm,
And now it's the section with the voices in his head, the
right,
things that are echoing,
right, the echoes
statements
in his
from
head,
throughout the play,
right,
statements from history, right? And it's
right,
sort of, the how he's going. I don't say going mad, but the heat in his brain is not just external heat. It's anger, it's intensity, it's frustration, it's confusion to a
mhm,
certain extent, right? All of that building to the moment
right,
that he climbs into the rafters
right.
and is
So
above our heads.
So it's about those voices in his head. It's about the chorus, the cast becoming the voices. The cast are also setting up the boundaries that are
Mm,
happening with him in terms of the internal conflict that is actually going on with crew, to do with traveling up to Mass Charlie house, and it's
mhm.
also what is happening in terms of the distance between the two of them. Charlie, for instance, asks him who tell him to come up the front step, whatever the line
Right.
is, go around the
To
back.
the back door.
Right. So there are those internal and external boundaries that are going on. So in terms of so two things the chorus is doing: they're providing or they're manifesting the boundaries, and they are echoing the voices
Hmm.
in the head.
Hmm. And sound echoes are important through the play, especially the water becomes the sea, the sound of the voices of vendors become moving to the auction scene, He uses all of those elements poetically. So here's this perhaps climactic moment,
Yeah, there's
if
the
this play has a
climactic.
climax, with Crew played by Sonson, Sonson possessed with the machete over Stone playing Charlie.
Right,
This is the image that we saw a version of on the cover of the program, and
right,
that switches from actual light to red light.
right.
So
So
it's
I
about
tried.
that choice.
Yeah, this I tried a sort of tripartite way of addressing this. One was actually um, doing it in actual motion, which is the first one you saw. Scott asks for when he raises it, when he brings the machete down, the things go to black. So no shedding of blood is actually seen. We don't see the actual murder. Um, uh, and so what I did was by the red light is to show the enormity, the violence again, the imminent violence. Um, uh, and then there was a third action which we don't have a picture of, um, where all the audience, all the actors just got up from their positions. All the actors got up from their positions and faced the audience
Okay.
as a almost a challenge, as a question, is almost doing the same thing in a way that Jacko was doing when he was talking to Son Son.
As a
Uh,
maroon.
yeah, in the maroon scene. Yes. What's the purpose of this, Valiant? Is this what you want?
Mm-hmm.
You know, kind of
Mm-hmm.
thing. So that
And Bridget asked a similar question, I think, about if blood is all we know. Is it Bridget? Is
yeah,
it Bridget? Yeah, or Rachel at the end, towards the end. And this is where Son possessed with Crew is walking in the rafters above our heads,
yeah.
and there's concern about his safety.
Mm-hmm.
And Bridget persuades Jacko, the intermediate, the mediator,
Mm-hmm.
to bring him down. This is a moment when he almost falls.
Right.
That is a shock on people's faces,
Yeah.
and Pete turns away, doesn't want to see, and the drum is going.
Mm-hmm.
I'm running through this,
Yeah.
and here he comes down. So, your closing statements. We go to questions.
Okay. You say we do the closing
No, I'm
statement.
saying yes, the things you would like to tell us about how
Well,
the play
here is
ended, how production ended.
right. So here he comes down, and they move him from hand to hand. Um, Rachel has a final line about tears. I don't quite remember it. And then they go to, is that noise affecting? And then they go
Go
to the
ahead.
they go to the they go to the table,
Mm-hmm.
and they break the table. And no, not literally break the table, but symbolically break the table
Yes, please
by
explain.
lifting the white tablecloth, which the action of two people spreading a table is in the beginning,
Right.
not in the beginning of the nine night, and in the end they symbolically break the table by again lifting the fabric up in the air,
Okay.
and that final moment of the fabric being lifted, which we don't have a picture of, was
Right.
the end of the ritual,
The
and they,
ritual,
yeah, and they share the bread, and that's it.
and that's the end of the journey,
That's the end of the journey.
and the various overlapping rites of passage.
Right.
Okay, so let me
Right.
try and bring up the. Okay, so question one is what does the wake ceremony contribute towards the family spiritually?
Um,
Think about that one. What does
hmm.
it contribute towards the family spiritually?
Well, like I was saying, um, it is a major part of remembering stories of him. It it brings him into the present, brings the spirit into the present. You know, because it's about the first part of a rite of passage is about rupture. You've lost him. You've lost somebody. You lost. In the case of the of those of us who are, I keep saying amputated deliberately from Africa. There's loss. And then there's a period of transition, and the transition is about the memorializing. It's about the remembering. And in the process of contributing to the story, you're in fact contributing to your own sense of self, your own psychic balance, as it were.
So there's a kind of, at least there's a potential for a kind of healing
yes
to occur through that
right.
transition and passage.
Right.
I don't remember where, but I remember Michael Dash, perhaps in the title of an article talking about, you talk about amputation, and another verb for that is dismembering, cutting off a part. And he talks about membering, in other words, putting the parts back together or reattaching the parts, so that memory is a way of bringing ourselves back together. It's a way of healing, of suturing, that rupture.
And a very important thing to remember as well is that as part of our folk tradition, the rite of passage is for the individual who has passed as well.
Right.
Because
to take them into the land of the ancestors. Right.
Exactly. And part of our understanding is if they don't go off, if you don't do this ceremony, if this ritual does not take place, then
they can't rest.
They can't rest, and they will haunt us, and bad things will happen.
Right. And you had spoken in the very beginning about the layering, and the text makes references to things like sort of conflating 30 years and 300 years. Like there's a way in which Kru and his family are a microcosm or a unit representing a larger family. So that the things that are happening within that family are happening also on behalf of the race, are happening for all of us. And I'm always struck by how the audience gets implicated in the consequences of Son's possession when Scott has him, walking above the heads of the people who are sitting in the theater. So that, if him drop, he might drop on you. In fact, don't want him to drop.
In fact, as you will recall, Scott putting that deliberate moment there where he slips, is to A, test that involvement of the audience, and B, to engage them even more.
Right.
With that possibility
so
that he
we are invested, right? We are invested in Son coming down safely. For our own personal safety as well.
Yes. In fact, you should have heard the sort of shout from the audience, that came from the bottoms of their belly in some cases.
Well, understandably, it's not every day you think somebody could drop on your head.
Right.
And you don't go into the theater with that kind of contract in your mind.
Right.
That I could be personally harmed. Okay, so we have some more questions now. Now we have 5 questions. I'm just going to run through them so you have a sense of what we have here. Okay, so number 2 asks, what does the wake ceremony represent for Afro-Caribbean people's identity in modern society? I think some of that we might have spoken to, but we can come back. Right? And then 3, is there any recording of the play available to students? We can answer that very quickly. There should be a recording at the Edna Manley College. Whether it is available, I am quite unsure. So
for copyright purposes, they're not allowed to release it.
Right.
Because you got permission to direct it just for that and to show it just for that purpose when it was done.
Right.
So it can be disseminated thereafter.
Without new permission and different legal arrangements. Okay. Right. So can you explain the echo in Jacko, Son, and Bridget's relationship? This is something I had mentioned. So I'll do a little thing and you can add if you'd like to. The Jacko and Bridget and Son The whole community knows that they did there, right?
Right.
They were an item.
Right.
And yet in the play, it is clear that Bridget transitions, shall we say, Bridget makes a move because Jacko is interested in Bridget. And
Mhm.
Bridget makes the choice of Jacko for her partner because she sees Jacko as more stable, as more consistent, less prone to anger, and therefore for her, a better possible father for her children.
Right.
And it is a surprise to many people in the community. And this feeling is that there's sort of some bad blood between the brothers because, you know, it's kind of like Jacko Thief, Bridget from Son. But Bridget makes it very clear that it is her choice.
Mhm.
And she has this really memorable speech where she talks about, you know, she's not going to be like Lally, you know, sleep with every man in the village, anybody who comes down the street, kind of that kind of thing, right?
Mhm.
And that brings up something that we might not have mentioned quite specifically, and that is seeing possession. We've spoken about the spiritual possession and how that is used as a vehicle for transition and so on, but we haven't talked about the way in which possession can echo the question of ownership, right? To what extent do we own ourselves? Who owns the land is an important question in the play. The conflict between Crew and Charlie is a conflict both about the land and the water for the land,
Mhm.
and a conflict for Rachel, right? For the woman.
Yeah.
And in P's speech, in the crow's nest, and so on, in the dying planter's speech, there are these poetic links between the land as female, and there's a link between the land and woman, and the relationship between man and woman being parallel to the relationship between man and land. The thing is so thick and dense, it has all these
Yes.
layers.
Yes.
It's
It's
difficult to run
very
through
layered.
it.
Very layered.
It's
It
difficult to
echoes.
run through in two little
Yes.
sentences.
Quite a bit.
But yes, the triangle, when we discover, for many of us to our dismay, that there was a kind of a thing between Rachel
Yeah.
and Charlie,
Mhm.
right? So that Crew has reason to be jealous, right? So there's a
Mhm.
kind of triangle there, and then there's a triangle between Bridget and the two brothers. And
Mhm.
now the screen is scrolling up away from me. That was okay. That was question number 4. Question number 5, and we still have one that we haven't really come to. Does the lighting portray the different setting physically, and what is the significance? That's definitely for you.
Yeah.
Does the lighting portray the different setting physically, and what is the significance?
Well, the lighting serves in a way a number of things. One is basic, which is just illumination.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then and then you want to create atmosphere, mood, um, and then there's a symbolic by the use of the ears as a signifier. Um, uh, and also because in a way it helps us to signify or not signify to identify space, because the space itself is not going to be realistically represented.
Mm-hmm.
And so, for instance, in the case of the Maroons, they're in the bushes. And how do you create that sense of being in the bushes? It's the sense of being hidden, this the sense of hiding, the sense of um, foreboding. The plant and the dogs are coming, and so you might have noticed that it was a kind of spotty lighting, well, what is called a gobo, where you put some
So like light coming through the leaves of trees, that kind
right,
of thing. So you get,
right.
yeah.
So it was, yeah, so it's about creating space, environment, and so on. uh
And atmosphere,
Atmosphere.
yeah, sense, emotion, yeah, tension
Right.
and so on.
There's
So
also lighting also helps to determine time of day,
yes,
you know.
true.
Um,
So in this play, there's a kind of tension, not as a bad thing, between what is actual and real and what is mystic or spiritual or, you
mhm.
know, of another level, you know.
Yeah,
And the
yeah,
two things are working in relation, in tension
yeah,
throughout the
yeah,
play.
yeah, yeah.
Okay, so that was lighting. Do you say that, Rachel? I think some of these questions coming up now, I'll read them anyway so that they know we are aware of them, but I think I just answered some of it. Do you say that Rachel is used, or would I say that Rachel is used as a means of property? So this is the thing about possession and owning again now, house duties, by both Marsh, Charlie, and Crew, and does it contribute to the patriarchal system in society? No, we hadn't really touched the question of gender in this play, and it is a whole other thing.
Mhm.
But yes, certainly. When I was talking about the way that the play talks about woman and land
Mhm.
and man possessing, right?
Mhm.
And there's a hint of something in when Rachel talks about when encounters Charlie, and Charlie is asking, what made it so easy, however many years ago it was to pick up your skirt in the barn and that kind of thing, and she was saying,
Mhm.
I felt sorry for you and things. um, there's a way in which that scene opens up the question of the possibility, because it seems that when they were young, as happens in many cases, when they were younger, they could play together or whatever. But when you go older and come through puberty, the way you relate is a whole other question. And
Mhm.
that she being socially much lower than him, and possibly to be employed by him and so on, that she could have pity or sympathy or whatever for him, that that she could feel that he could be suffering in a way, in a kind of
Mhm.
way. That
Mhm. Mhm.
all of those possibilities. I mean, Scott Scott always complicates
Mhm.
what you might think of as
Right.
black and white. There
Yes.
is a
Yes.
whole heap of gray, right?
Yes.
And nothing is simple and straightforward. So
And
yes,
there's the interesting counterpart between she and Bridget in a way, right?
right,
Bridget deciding to leave Son,
son,
right?
yeah.
Because family is more important to her.
Than
Uh,
passion.
right. You know. In other words, and she makes a clear choice.
And
Um,
Scott has her announce that choice.
yes.
And
Yes.
he times it in the very moment when he's going to tell us about the thing between Rachel and Charlie. So
Right.
that there's a distinct, I mean, and if you sort of look for a continuum, I mean, Lally is also a woman.
Right.
Lally, I mean, not as large a character in the body of the play, but I think she's an important counterpoint as well for another of the debates that Scott raises, because Lally is like I don't know, you might call her a kind of skettle, right?
Yes.
But
Yes.
Dreamboat can't hold down
A free
Lally.
spirit.
Yes, free spirit, right?
Yeah.
Dreamboat can't hold down Lally. Right?
Right.
Lally will go with who she want go with, which is
Exactly.
another kind of self-empowerment and liberty,
Yeah. And
right?
Scott,
She
I think, deliberately dealing with the gender issue in a generational way.
yes, because
You
she's younger.
understand?
This is true. This is true because
Right?
Rachel is the eldest of them,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And you get the sense. I haven't looked back at the script to know, but I get the sense of Bridget, if she's not older, certainly of being more mature
Right.
than Lally,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
there's that, and the generational question is an important one in the play as well, because they talk about memory and they talk about how the young people don't know certain things,
Right.
and
Right.
there's so many layers,
Yeah.
right?
I mean,
So patriarchal. Yes, you want to say something more about that?
no, I said that's why every time I direct it and I look at it, I realize how much I miss. I want to do it again because it's
You
not
think
possible to to do everything in one.
everything in any one production, right? So
As a
seven.
matter
Can
of
you?
fact,
Mhm.
it was directed about maybe 5 times by Ori Warner, and I remember
Ah,
meeting with Scott in the U.S. While he was at Yale, just shortly after Ori Warner had done it up for the university, the last production that he did, and he said that he said to somebody who 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 had seen it, did he get it right this time?
oh dear.
That's a hell of a challenge
Yes,
to get it
getting
right.
it right.
You know,
Okay, question number 7. Can you explain the love relationship and conflicts between Mas Charlie, Crew, and Rachel, and the conflicting relationship in terms of love
sorry,
between
sorry.
them?
Beg you say that again.
We've spoken about that.
Beg you read that again.
Oh, sorry. Can you explain the love relationship and conflicts between Mas Charlie, Crew, and Rachel, and the conflicting relationship in terms of love between Rachel, Sonson, and Jackal, which I hope I have.
Yes,
Good,
I think
right?
you have addressed
Okay,
that.
so number 8. What exactly? Oh dear. And before I even finish the question, let me just say that I don't think anybody can say exactly when it
Mhm.
comes to Scott's work. What exactly is the lesson Crew is teaching at the end of the play itself for the audience?
or teaching all the above things that we've been talking about.
Talking about.
You know, you know, as we said, the gender issue. He's talking about as
Well, the
we
question says crew is teaching, so I'm not so sure if that. I don't
crew
know.
is teaching,
It says crew
or
is teaching,
through
not
crew
Scott.
perhaps.
Right. What is the lesson? Crew is teaching.
Yeah. Well, what at the end of it, what's I think I wonder what is crew teaching.
Mhm.
That one is a challenge to ask what crew is teaching. I think
Mm.
you could say perhaps what Scott is teaching through
Through
crew.
crew, or what we learn
Hmm.
through crew, right? What
Right,
we learn through crew's experience.
right. Um,
We learn perhaps the limitations of violence,
yes.
although
Um,
there is a way in which some people read crew as even a Christ type of figure, just in terms of being the sacrificial lamb.
mhm,
So he commits murder, but then he too dies.
right.
So with the spilling of his blood, perhaps we can, I don't know, we can rest. I don't know, or we have atonement. I
Yeah,
don't
yeah.
know, you know.
Atonement. We can learn.
Hmm.
We have this experience to learn from, right?
Yeah.
Um, and it's more of an experience than a fact,
Yes.
you know.
Yes.
But the theater allows you, fiction allows you to look at the entire experience, not just the experience of the family, but the entire experience of slavery and colonialism. Um, and as represented here, it allows you to debate with yourself, to make choices,
Hmm.
your own choices, as because we are still in the process of building nation,
Hmm.
you know. The question of family is also an issue in our world, in our society.
Hmm.
The question of relationships, um, you know,
The question of how we use, manipulate, experience our Africanness,
yes,
you know.
yeah,
I think there's that in there too, and how we deal with our non-Africanness. In other words, how do we deal with all the stuff that colonization has given us, brought to us, right?
yeah,
How do we deal with the Charlie in us, right? So how do I deal with the fact that I speak this language
mhm,
that comes from Europe, and I don't have an African language,
right.
you know, and
So
and, and what
in a
use?
sense, it's also dealing with creolization,
Yes.
right? And in fact, I always think that one of the reasons why that scene begins with the slave ship off the coast of Africa, um, with who are the inhabitants of that slave ship,
Hmm.
both white and black,
Right.
right? And when P is talking as one of the sailors up in the slave ship, it's as if he has been also amputated from his home,
This is true, and to a certain extent creolized, because the
right?
future he's looking to is a future that is already I don't know what word is to use, but it's a future from which he cannot extricate his
Right,
relationship to black and his
right,
relationship to sun and drum and
right.
this world. When you spoke about the significance of 1792 as a point when the trade was actually being supposed to be being abandoned and so on, I remember having problems myself with, like, why these particular years, like why he chose the eve of emancipation and not emancipation itself or after emancipation, why 1820 or whatever. And I think, I don't remember where from, but somebody suggested, which I thought was really interesting, the fact that even in those years you might have certain kinds of echoes. So, for
Mhm.
example, 1792 is 300 years after 1492, and 1492 is Columbus's arrival.
Mhm.
So that he may, even
There's a
in
very
that.
interesting, I think, conflation there in the
Hmm.
imaginary. In
Hmm.
1792, 1492.
92, and the fact that he's playing with the 30 and the 300, you know
Right,
what I mean, and sort of cycles and
right,
repetitions and that kind of thing, and echoes. Here we go,
right.
right?
And I think the reason why it's 1834
mm,
and not
right,
1838 is
right.
that emancipation is yet to come.
This indeed, indeed. That was a promise. That was a moment of
Yeah,
promise.
yeah, yeah,
So them say,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
But
yeah.
we have a lot of work to do to emancipate here,
Right, right,
right?
right.
Yeah.
And in Rachel in the with the scene Rachel and Charlie, what we get when they talk about the story of that intimate event between the two of
Between
them,
them.
basically is two young people who have not yet imbibed
The nectar.
the nectar of racism.
Mm. Okay, right, right, right. Before they are locked away from each other,
Right.
they can relate as male and female, human,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Before they are locked into their categories,
Yes.
and then can only meet as employer employee,
And
and
he and
even that relationship has a history
yeah.
of
And
sexual of
he
sexual
turns
involvement.
he
Right?
turns some myths on its head. I mean, one of the myths he turns in his head, and I think the students can handle this. When he talks about her response to the size of his member.
Mhm.
You know,
Yes,
those
yes,
kind of things.
yeah,
He
yeah.
does.
He does he has ways of sort of destabilizing any comfort
Yeah.
in the sort of black and white.
Right.
Any confidence you might have that things are closed and
Yeah.
shut, and this is how it go.
Yeah.
Scott is gonna shake that up.
Yeah.
Right? He's gonna
Yeah.
say, no,
Yeah.
think again,
Yeah.
try again, no, think again,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
think again. It's much more complex than that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a very complex piece. Every time you read it, you see more. And part of the reason there is too, I don't know that this would necessarily address anything for the students, but it's because Scott is not just a poet, it's the type of poet that he is,
Mhm.
you
Okay.
know, because his poems, which are, the language is pared down, this is so minimalist, yet it captures so much. It's loaded,
Yes.
his poems. Uh,
Okay. Now, Eugene, you know you and I could talk for eternity
yeah,
about Echo. Our time is long past, so we have to wrap it up now. Thank you all very much for your attention and participation. Thank you, Eugene, for sharing your experience with Echo and the staging of it in 2014. This has been our session on the production of An Echo in the Bone, directed by Eugene Williams in 2014 at the Endamani College for the Visual and Performing Arts.